Oh, that's right. Health and wellness for life. Doctors are that you like. Yeah. We are the voice of the people. Take Christ wherever we go. The light is on our people tonight. Whatever you like, we put it down. The mic is hot, no doubt. The light is on.
Good evening, and welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining us for our special show today this evening on breast cancer because it's Breast Cancer Aware Month. So we're excited, and we have so many personal friends and family and associates and colleagues that have had this experience, unfortunately, but yet they have survived. So we have a doctor, we have an advocate, and we have a breast cancer survivor as well, which is wonderful. So I'm excited about this show. And I recommend you all to take notes because this is something and this is information that we need to know. And we're going to have a lot of information. So take notes. And I'm going to play like a teacher today. So I want everyone to take notes, and there's a test afterwards. Okay. So this show is going to be slightly different. I'm going to have a panel of guests. And as I mentioned, that we're going to have three guests: a doctor, survivor, and an advocate. And we're just going to have a conversation. It's going to be like a table talk. We're going to have a discussion, real questions, real information. And again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put it in the chat. And we will, if we have time in the show, we will display the question and hopefully answer that for you. So again, I hope you all gain great information from this, and this is something we need to know. So let me go ahead and bring our guests on. We have we have Vera. I wasn't sure who was coming on first, but ladies first, I guess. And we have Dr. Pryor. Hello, hello. And
Hello.
Janice. I believe Janice is going to be on shortly as well. But and once Janice is on, you all, I'm gonna go through each one, and I just want you all to just introduce yourselves, let the audience know who you are. Hi, Janice Satchel. Hello. Hi, Janice. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So I want you to all to just kind of introduce yourself to our audience, okay? So, Burrow Brackett, we're going to start with you first. So go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
All right, my name is Bro Anthony Brackett. I am a 14-year breast cancer survivor. I'm also an author, a playwright. I am a media specialist in the public school system. I teach kids from grades 5 through 8. And I am excited to be on this panel today.
Thank you so much. We're excited to have you, especially me. So, all right. So next we have Miss Janice Satchel. Go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone, please.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you perfectly fine.
Great. My name is Janice Thatcher, and I'm a breast cancer survivor going on 3 years coming to the end of this year. And thank you for having me here.
All right, wonderful. I love your hair color. Is that red?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
I love it. I love color. It looks good. I think Dr. Pryor had his hair that color, right, Dr. Pryor?
Exactly.
Go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone, please.
Okay, thanks, Tina Marie. My name is Dr. David Pryor. I am an internal medicine physician, and I am out here in California. As an internal medicine physician, obviously you treat all types of conditions, and certainly encouraging people to get their screenings is part of that. So I'm excited to be here. And also, my wife is a breast cancer survivor. So this is a very special month, obviously, for me, and a very special time. So looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you again. And hands to all the survivors. And of course to you too as well, Doctor, because we couldn't do it without you, of course. But first and foremost, let's talk about just mammograms. Like, who can give us a idea of what's the difference between a mammogram or just a breast check? Or is there a difference?
Yeah, Tina Marie, a mammogram versus a what? A breast
Just
exam?
going for a breast exam.
Oh,
Is
okay.
there a difference
Yeah.
or yeah, go ahead.
Well, I can start off. Obviously, breast cancer is something that a lot of women are going to encounter. As you know, about 1 in every 8 women are going to encounter, unfortunately, be diagnosed with breast cancer at some time in their lifetime. But it
Mm.
is, fortunately, one of those cancers that we do have screening, preventative screenings for, and most commonly you hear about the mammogram. And so I'll just say, I know we're going to get into a lot of the details, but yeah, there are in general, you think of if you're a woman of average risk for breast cancer, starting about age 40, you start to get your mammograms. And there are different experts and different panels that recommend slightly different things. But in general, you would get a mammogram starting at age 40 if you're average risk. Some people say you should get a mammogram every year starting at age 40. Others say it should be every other year. But that gives you just an idea. But then other things, if you have a family history, your mother, one of your siblings have had breast cancer, that puts you in a different risk category. So you may not need to get screening earlier. But in general, mammograms are one of the ways that we screen for breast cancer because we really want to make sure that if somebody is diagnosed with breast cancer, we want to catch it as early as possible.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Pryor. So, Janice, is this something you had to do, or you were going regularly, like the doctor stated? You started early, you caught it early. What is your story in regards to that?
Well, when it comes to my personal experience, I happen to have large babies. So therefore, for me, it was kind of harder to determine how to do the step breast examination, which is
Mhm.
always encouraged
Ah,
for all women to do. However, um, when it came to mammogram, from my perspective, I've always wanted to know why do you all have to smash it so hard, because that is just so uncomfortable. But I was able to understand later
mhm.
that it was kind of like the way the way it would explain to me. Think of a clump of clay, and there's a pebble in the middle of it. So they had to smash the dam for that pebble to show up. And of course, over the years, I have always been concerned by having such large clump of clay that it was only mashed down so far. So that have always been a concern for me. So I made it a point to have a mammogram every single year.
Ah, that is really good. So, Burrow, so with you being an advocate, how do you keep everyone aware about, much like Miss Janice stated, self-check? I forgot about that part. So, what did you educate everyone about, Burrow, in regards to that?
If it doesn't feel right, get it checked. If something doesn't feel right in your breast, get it checked because sometimes our the density can
Mm.
be totally different in each person's anatomy. So I always advocate go get it checked. And you have some people, even people that I know, they're afraid to go get it checked because they don't want to know. They're afraid of what it could be. But I always say go get it checked. Don't be afraid of anything because you don't know anything right now. Don't be scared because you really don't know. Let's wait, let's go, and let's get it done. And I'll say, hey, I'll go with you. What do you need me to do? Let's go get it checked.
Wow, yeah, that's good. And before I get to my next question, let me go ahead and introduce my co-host here, Lala. Hello, Lala.
Hey,
Hey, girl. Hey.
hi
So,
everybody.
so Lala is gonna host the show with me. So she's gonna, ask you all some questions as well. So before we get to your question, if you have any questions, Lala, Burrow. So you was talking about breast density. What what is breast density and how does it affect breast cancer? Or yeah, so how, what is the risk in that? How is that, does that work?
Well, it's the same thing. Adding on to what Janice said about it's the thickness of your breast. So
Uh,
sometimes it might not be detected, or you might have to do something totally different. Like in my case, I had the density was really great, and so the time
mhm.
that I went, the machine did not catch it at all, but it was palpable to me. There was something wrong, but the machine did not catch it because the breast was so dense. And plus, it's just like a clump of a clay, just like she said. So you have to press down in order to find whatever's there. So that's some of the issues that some women have too. Is that I'll just say the thickness in their breast is, a little difficult to manage sometimes.
Right, right.
And I would add there that when that happens, women with very dense breasts, there are other imaging tools, right? MRI of the breast, ultrasound of the breast. So the doctors can take that into consideration, and sometimes the traditional mammogram isn't able to detect that. They can use other imaging to try to make the detection.
Absolutely.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. Lala, you had something?
So I what I came in on, I wanted to ask a question because, and I don't know if we've covered this already, but so
Mhm.
often we talk about, women going to make sure that they're getting their mammogram. And I think about 10 years ago, I was educated on the fact that breast cancer is also prevalent in men as well. And so we advocate for women to get mammograms once a year. But what kind of advocacy, if there is any, do we have for men to also check as well?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, male breast cancer is real. It is much more of a rare condition, obviously, than breast cancer in women, but certainly it is real. So we do not like recommend that men get mammograms, right? That's not the screening. It is more so of for men to be aware, and that if they notice a tenderness in one on their chest, in one of their pectoral muscles there. If they notice a asymmetry, one side's getting bigger than the other, it could just be what we call gynecomastia, right? Or they'll
Mhm.
call them men boobs, right? It could be that as men get older and put on some weight, but it could be something else too. So I think the biggest thing is for men to be aware and don't just ignore any symptoms. And if you do feel something abnormal, you feel a certain tenderness or a lump, then you do need to go into the doctor and get that checked out with imaging as well.
Okay, and that's why I asked because you have a lot of the larger fellas who do have what they would call man breasts, and so that was what my concern was is there something that they can look out for? So thank you for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And I think that's something that maybe, we don't talk about a lot, we don't hear a lot about, even though it's not much of a numbers, it's not a high number of men getting breast cancer, but I think it's still worth a conversation, because I think knowledge is power. So,
Yeah,
so
and one of the
mhm.
most famous people you hear about, remember, was Richard Roundtree from Shaft. He was a person who had, male breast cancer. So,
Oh, wow. See, I didn't know
Mm,
that. Interesting.
mm.
Okay. Well, we have a question here. How important is a support system for someone after they find out they have had breast cancer? Great question.
I think on that question, it's very important that they have
Mm.
a support system because these are the people that's going to help you get through it. And what I say to people when they ask a question, well, what do we do? We want to do something, but we don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. And my first answer is just listen. You don't have to
Ah,
figure out anything right now. Just listen to that person, whatever they're going through. Just listen, and don't try to give them advice. No, oh, I'll do it this way, or you should do it this way. Just
mm,
listen for a moment. So it's very important, even for the caregivers, for the family members, for the friends. It's very important to be sensitive to how they're feeling because this is something that has punched you in your chest. and
Mm.
trying to figure out how you gonna get that out of your chest and navigate the rest of your life. So it's very important to have a support system.
Yeah, yeah. So, Miss Janice, like, how was your support system or family history? Did you find out any family history prior to, learning your new reality? What was that? What was that for you?
Well, for me, it just so happened I didn't have any other history in my family in terms of breast cancer or any other cancer for that matter. As a matter of fact, I'm the first of my sibling to even
Oh, wow.
um, have cancer of any type. However, even before I received that report or result,
Mhm.
I have been exposed to the education of breast cancer for a number of years. I'm a member of a sorority, Delta Theta Theta, where we have done breast cancer awareness for
Mm.
years and years to come. And the church that I belong to has the breast cancer ministry. So I've always been exposed to education, the importance of breast um, self examination. I've been aware
Mhm.
of if you find something, go have it checked out. I've been aware of those things. So when I went through the process and got the diagnosis, it was more so, okay, this is supposed to happen. Okay, what's next? I was more receptive of my diagnosis rather
Mhm.
than letting it scare me away because I've been that exposed to the breast cancer education for a number of years.
Wow, yeah, I think again, knowledge is power. So it's good that you knew ahead of time, kind of, some information and how to move forward, unfortunately, with your reality of, experiencing that. So Lila, I don't want to keep going because, this is a very interesting topic for me because I'll be long.
And I have look, I'm sitting here like I have so many questions because
Go for it.
education of it. Speaking of education of it, there's been so many myths, so many different types of information that has gone out to people throughout the years. And I know, being a mother of six, like before I had my first child, it was told to me if you breastfeed, then you can reduce the chances of getting breast cancer. Like, what are some of the myths that you've heard that are going around that we can just put out there so that people aren't walking around thinking, oh, well, I'm doing this so I'm good?
Right, right. Good question.
Yeah. Oh, I can start off with that. You're right. Some things can be a little bit of a myth, but some things can be a little bit of a half truth. I'll start with the one you're talking about, breastfeeding. It is pretty well known that oftentimes women that breastfeed are able to lose the weight after they've given birth, oftentimes, quicker than if you don't breastfeed. So the
Mhm.
connection there, I see that, one of the risk factors for women developing breast cancer is being overweight or obese, right? The thinking is that when you have more of these adipose or fat cells in your body, they can release more estrogen, and some estrogen tied to breast cancer. So I think from that aspect, even right, people that can get back to their pre-birth weight, right? They can lose weight and stay in shape. That's going to be a benefit. But to your point, I mean, the biggest risk factors, you're talking about, overweight and obesity certainly are a risk factor. Um, Diet and nutrition, right? People that eat better, right? That's a way of kind of reducing some of your risk as well. And then you may talk about obviously the genetic risks, right? That's why if you have breast cancer, the doctor always will have you get those genetic testing, right? The BRCA1 and 2, just to make sure there's not a genetic risk factor. So all those things come into play. But I would say overall, the biggest thing for any woman is just trying to maintain as healthy a lifestyle with your diet, nutrition, exercise is certainly something that is important for everyone to do.
Now, is there something that, like, I know for me, on my dad's side, pretty much all of his sisters passed away from cancer. And
Mhm.
so, is there something, for a person that's doing your annual checkup, should there be something to double up on, or Because it is a scary thought to, have that in the back of your head where you're like, I'm doing my annual checkups, but this is a history, on my dad's side. So is it something that I need to kind of like add to the regimen to ensure that I am healthy?
Yeah, I could jump in there. And so, what's recommended is that really starting by age 25, you should go in to your doctor and have that discussion. Your doctor should kind of identify your personal risk for developing breast cancer, right? And how they do that. They do take into account, they ask, well, did your mother have breast cancer? Did your siblings have breast cancers? Any, aunts? Those are not. So they would take that into account. Was there any genetic tests done in your family? So when you take that into account, then the doctor could say, hey, you're 25, and given that you're a higher risk than normal, I don't want you to wait till 40 to get your mammogram. Maybe we're going to start you at 30. So that's what's kind of taken into consideration. There's the average risk, that's when you start at 40, but there is this individualized risk that I would encourage you go into your doctor, look online as well, but ask about that. And there are these calculators that will, you'll answer certain questions and it'll give you a number, and that'll tell you if you're average risk, high risk, or lower risk.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So we have a question here.
Yes.
What's the ratio of African American women who get breast cancer compared to others? I guess that would be another doctor question.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that very clear. I was looking at that today online, the latest statistics. So compared to white women, African American women actually are diagnosed with breast cancer at a slightly lower rate.
Mm,
Okay, so more white women in a given year are going to be diagnosed with breast cancer than black women. But the big issue is that for black women, our mortality rate is 40% higher. So when we get diagnosed, even though we get diagnosed at a lower rate than white women, we have worse outcomes. We die
mm,
more often than a white woman. And
mm,
a lot of reasons for that, right? One is, well, are we getting diagnosed later or a more advanced stage, and not maybe not getting the treatment? So there are a lot of things there, but that's the big issue. We don't do as well when we have breast cancer.
yes, yes. And this will be a question for all three of you, really, because Burrow, you're a survivor as well as an advocate. When it comes down to treatment and the side effects, I mean, all three of you can pretty much elaborate a little bit on that, because I think from my understanding and me talking with different women in regards to this that have, survived, they always talk about that, the treatment and the side effects. How, like, explain that and talk a little bit more about that for me.
All right, so I'll jump in. The side
Mhm.
effects, it depends on your mind.
Mm,
It depends on if you're going to go kicking and screaming
Mhm.
into every treatment that you have to do, or you're going to say, okay, what's next? Okay, give it to me. Like I did chemo, I didn't do radiation. I had to do surgeries with an S on it. And
Oh,
so I
wow.
was in the mindset, okay, if I got to do it, okay, come on, let's do it. What's next? I had a
Mm,
team of doctors who were amazing.
mm,
And the side effects, it was a little difficult, a little challenging, but however, you just kind of pressed through it. It made you feel heavy. It didn't make you feel good. You might have been in the bathroom or throwing up, or you couldn't taste your food. But I think
mm.
the side effects outweighed anything else for me. I was like, okay, let's do it.
Okay.
There are side
This-
effects. Some
yeah.
people don't want those side effects, but I say if that's a choice between living and not being here, I,
Mm, right, right. All right. So Janice, how about you? How was your, because I know it probably varies, individual by individual. So
correct.
Janice, how was your treatment or your side effects? What was your experience with that?
Well, first off, I do kind of want to reiterate the importance of mammogram on a regular basis because I was doing that annually, they were able to detect a difference from year to year, and
Mm,
it was enough for them to have me to come back in to follow up and things of that nature. And when they showed me the X-ray, it looked like a little speck. And I'm going, is that really a mash there, or is that a scratch on the film? You know, that how
Mm.
small it is. And as I mentioned earlier, that my lump of clays are quite large and quite dense, I was impressed that they were able to find that little speck.
Wow.
And the procedure that I had done is called a lumpectomy. And basically, they go in and kind of scoop it out. And
Mm.
it went well, thankfully. And afterwards, I had six um, radiation treatment. I didn't have any chemo.
Mm.
I didn't really have side effect that affect my appetite or energy or anything of that nature. As a matter of fact, they told me I can go to work because I was working part time at that time, and they say I can go to work. So I didn't have any severe side effects due to the radiation. The only thing that I remember was the affected breast was darker or discoloration, but that only lasted long for the radiation. Once the radiation was over, it went back to its normal color, but it wasn't nothing extreme. There was,
Mhm.
I would say, the most side effects I had to deal with was the pain. You know, I had a surgery. They had to dig
Mhm.
in a little bit and scoop it out. So they may
Mhm.
have hit a couple of nerves. So
Mhm.
there's some discomfort that I may have even to this day and may continue to have, but it does not impact my way of life or anything like that. So I'm able to move forward, just like what was stated earlier. It's the mindset too. I was
Yes. Yeah.
I was the kind of person. Okay, what's next? You
Mhm,
know,
mhm.
Mm. Mm.
and
I
But
want to say first, I just want to salute you two queens because it's
Mm.
just amazing to hear you up here just telling your story, and you're both so beautiful. And you know, it we a lot of times get this misnomer that being a product of breast cancer or any type of cancer, you have to look the part, and
Mm.
a lot of people get so afraid of that word, and they think like their life is over. And it's not so. I know so many beautiful women and men
That's
who have
true.
been, a product of cancer in some way or another, and they're survivors. And so I just want to salute you and
Yes.
over here just for doing what you do. Things like these just get my gears going of what can I do? And so there's so many people I'm pretty sure like myself who are like, what can we do to not just educate in a month, sort of like how we treat Black History Month. Like I want to do this on an ongoing basis because it's
Mhm. Mhm.
related to the month of October. Like, what is it that we can do to bring more awareness of this epidemic, so to speak, so that people who don't ordinarily get the education that would be necessary for them to be able to do um, pre-screenings to make sure that they don't have it. If they do, that they catch it early enough for them to, proceed, you know, the way they need to. Like, what would you have liked to have had um, prior to finding out your diagnosis, your prognosis? What would you have liked to have seen?
okay, so let me answer that a little bit and let me go back to one of the side effects to what I forgot. One of the biggest side effects for in our community is losing your hair.
Mm.
Well, for
Mm.
me, it didn't bother me because I could
Mhm.
buy some hair. I could buy some hair. So I was okay with losing my
Say
hair.
that again. You can say that again.
You can buy hair, but a lot of women are afraid because we're taught that that's our crown. But I
Mhm.
was okay with it because actually I shaved my head and my husband was like, "What are you doing?" Because I was like, "Well, it's coming out. Let's just go." And I already
Mhm.
had my wig set up, so I was kind of prepared. But that's one of the side effects that we do not want to actually cross that bridge to do. And as far as getting the word across about this, we need to do something more than in October. Like as an advocate or a survivor, we need to tell our stories, because it's not real until you meet someone who's experienced what we celebrate or what we acknowledge in October. We need to constantly tell our story to everybody, because I ask my friends all the time, okay, so you got your girls covered, let's go. We need to make sure that you know that you're taking care of yourself. And if you're not comfortable with that doctor, then find another doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the best thing we can do is just to tell our story, not just in October.
Yes, it needs to be a consistent conversation for sure. So we have a question here from Lavinia, and I'm not quite sure if it was completed question yet. But what are the R? What are the R? I'm not sure if that's like a lingo in breast cancer world. I don't know. And if I'm reading that, let me know. But Lavinia, maybe you can. Okay, here we go. So maybe here we go. So there we go. There's the question, because I figured it wasn't completed yet. So, what can we look forward to along the lines of treatment that are less invasive or radical?
Yeah, I can take that. One of the underlying things here that I think we need to point out is that all breast cancer is not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are diagnosed with breast cancer and they, take the biopsy, as you know, they're running a lot of different tests on it. And some of those tests talking about, the hormone receptor, right? Is it estrogen and progesterone positive, something called HER2? So all those things are taken into consideration and they do staging, but that really dictates it. So you saw on Janice, I believe, right, said she had just the lumpectomy and the radiation because that was what fit with her type of breast cancer. Other people don't have that option. They need to get chemotherapy and they need to have surgery. And some people need to get a mastectomy or a bilateral mastectomy, which is both breasts. So there are different types of breast cancer, and often that dictates the treatment that you can get. But I will say the treatments are getting better and better all the time. If it's chemo you need, there's now better chemotherapy drugs than before. So it's an ongoing process, but it all depends on, again, after they stage and type your type of breast cancer, then they come up with a treatment plan. And I will say this: if you have an opportunity to get a second opinion, this is one time I would actually recommend it because breast cancer and cancer in general, it's still not always an exact science. You can go to two very good hospitals or health systems and talk to the oncologist, and sometimes they have a slightly different pathway of going forward. So I would recommend, if you have the chance, this would be a time to maybe get a second opinion before you start your treatment so that you feel comfortable that this is the right treatment, pathway for you.
And you heard it from the doctor first, so I took note of that one. Yeah. So what's how important is the follow up? Because I've heard you all mention follow up, Janice and Burl, and Doctor, you can join in as well. But what's important about the follow up, and how soon does follow up happen?
Well,
When it comes,
go ahead.
oh, when it comes to follow up, well, when you ask that question, to me, follow up apply to any health issues, whatever
Mhm.
that may be. You always should follow up. If the doctors say come back in 3 months, go back in 3 months or 6 months or whatever the case may be. Follow up is always important because you never know what can develop later or not
Okay.
develop later, to make sure that nothing good develop later. So I would say follow up is important. I'm still following up even 3 years later. I follow up with the oncologist every 6 months. Just
Ah,
yeah. So yeah. So whatever the doctor recommend, I follow it.
okay, okay.
And
And
I
again, I'm someone that haven't, knock on wood, I haven't had this experience. So I'm asking questions that generally I would want to know, and maybe someone else wants to know as well, because we think about follow up. We don't have enough conversation about this. We don't talk about family, treatment. We don't talk about side effects. Yes, we're going to lose our hair. Majority of us, maybe it's just me and my world, but I buy my hair. It's like it's not a big deal. But I did hear that you lose your sex drive. That concerns me. I'm just saying.
Okay, now come on, Doc, talk about
That's
that.
funny. That's funny. I know. The one thing I'll say about all that, right, is that you'll hear about different treatments, and you know, everybody's experience is a little different or it's individualized. That even men, when men have prostate cancer or surgery, right, they'll say, well, you may not be able to achieve erections anymore. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. So, you do have to keep that positive attitude. You have to know what the side effects are, but certainly, it doesn't mean you're going to get all those side effects. And maybe if it's your sexual, whatever it is, it doesn't necessarily mean that happens. So
Right.
I do have a question along those lines. Well, not along those lines, but
Of course, you leave me out here by myself. It's okay.
so not put me in trouble on this. I know my husband's watching, my mama watching. You won't get me in trouble. I'm a grown woman, but you're gonna get me in trouble. But I do have a question for someone who has gone through treatments and things of that nature, and they do happen to become pregnant. Um, how does that affect them being able to do those natural things that you would do, for your infant, such as breastfeeding,
Mm,
or is there an effect to that at all?
yeah, that is a good question. A woman who has had breast cancer, and then becomes pregnant and wants to breastfeed. I'll be honest, I'm not going to give you an answer. I don't actually know because, oftentimes women, not always, that are having breast cancer, you see more in the 50s and 60s. So that time it doesn't.
Well, those 50-year-olds are having babies.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
you ain't talking to me.
Not me either. I'm done. But there are those.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Bear, I don't know if you have anything more to add, any experiences you've been with any survivors that fit that demographic of had breast cancer and then got pregnant.
No, I no.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now that you bring this up, I actually met a young lady at a event a few months ago who was pregnant and discovered she had breast cancer while she was pregnant. And now she has a nonprofit organization that she does because no one's never heard of that before. And I wish I knew offhand her organization. But yeah, I met this young lady that actually was pregnant and she discovered she had breast cancer and had to go through chemo and everything while she was pregnant.
Oh wow.
Well, and I had a friend, honestly, who had that situation again, diagnosed with breast cancer while pregnant. And of
Mm,
course, could not do the chemo while they're pregnant, right? You can't give the chemo to the baby. And you know what I mean? So she had to wait.
wow.
And that was very difficult because you want to attack the breast cancer as soon as you can, but she couldn't because she was pregnant. So
Wow.
that was
Yeah.
very, very difficult situation.
Very interesting. So we have a question here. Can you explain the stages of breast cancer? And I think the doctor mentioned that a little bit, but if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, doctor.
Yeah, I usually think of stages like, stage 1 through 4, stage 1, 2, 3, 4. And stage 1 typically in cancers is very localized. So it may just be in the breast. And they do different tests and they'll look at the lymph node. There's no lymph node involvement. It's really just localized there. That would be a stage 1. And then, of course, if the lymph nodes are involved, that increases the staging. And then all the way to stage 4, which is we call more metastatic disease. So that disease has spread to other parts of the body. And so that's like a stage 4. And so that does go back to that first statement of, if you wait and you're not getting your exams, you're not seeing the doctor, right? The higher chance that you're diagnosed with the breast cancer at a late stage and more difficult to treat. If you go in early and you get it at stage 1, that's when you have your best options to treat it and to cure it. And many of these breast cancers in stage 1, they have a 95% 5-year survival. So you really, really do well. So that's what the stages refer to. And oftentimes, even you might have surgery, the doctors will take some lymph nodes and they'll look at all that under the microscope, and they'll do a CT scan. So they do all that. We call it staging after they do the biopsy just to see where you're at.
Wow, interesting. This is go ahead, Lala.
I have a question. So for the ladies, the two survivors, two queens, how difficult was it, and how did that play out when you received your diagnosis and you had to share it with your family?
Mm.
How long did you take to share it, and how did that go?
I guess
I'll
that would be
go.
for Beryl and Janice. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
I
so
was
okay, go ahead, Janice. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
not a problem. For me, when I got the diagnosis, I shared with my partner immediately, and unfortunately, he kind of reacted differently. Um, like, what did this mean? He was more in a frantic type mode, and I was more so like trying to calm him down, so to speak. I told my son, and he said, "Do I need to worry?" I said, "Only if there's anything to worry about." And just because of those two situations, I pretty much kind of kept it to myself because I did not want to deal with anybody with the frantic type of reaction when I
Mhm.
wasn't having it. So I don't need your frantic reaction to come on me when I'm up here trying to keep cool and saying what's next.
Right.
So
Mhm.
for my story, I shared it with my husband. I shared it with Taurus. I got the diagnosis when I was at school. I was teaching, and I was kind of like in disbelief. So I was trying to tell him to hurry up and get home. And then I was like, well, I'll see you when you get home. We're just gonna sit down and we're just gonna chat about some things. And we had dinner that night. Our oldest son was off to college. The other two they were at home. And when I told my husband first, we were just kind of like in disbelief because there was no breast cancer in my family. And I'm like, wait a minute
Mhm.
now. So you're trying to figure out how they're going to treat you because you don't know where it came from. So I told him we were in disbelief. And I said, okay, so we got to tell the boys. And we told them. And after telling them, I went upstairs. To be honest, I cried. I didn't cry for me. I cried for them because
Mm.
I didn't want them to have to, go through that. And my prayer was, Lord, don't let me look like I'm sick.
Yeah.
Don't let me look like I'm sick. I still tried to get up and move even after all the surgeries and stuff and everything that I went through. I greeted them every day at the door when they came in. I didn't want to look sick. I didn't want them to carry that with them through school and stuff like that. But I told my mother, and the first thing she said, Burl, you'll be fine. I said, all right, mama, it's on. So
Oh,
yeah, that was it.
that's
That sounds like something my mama would have said.
exactly. And it's just listening and going through this whole entire interview, it's just more. It's more and more important that we get information out because, as the doc said, one size doesn't fit all. And there's so many people out here afraid to even say something about what they may have felt or discovered on their own selves because they're afraid. They have not heard their story yet. It's almost like sitting in the congregation and the pastor's like, I'm coming down your street. Like somebody hasn't heard their story yet. And
Mhm.
so it's so important to have these conversations, again, not just in October, but throughout the year, because there's so many people who are afraid. They don't have the education on breast cancer, let alone cancer at all. So they don't know what to look for. They don't know what to do once they think they felt something.
Mhm.
So I just applaud you all for just being on this
Yes.
and just being, that platform for those who may have been afraid to just ask,
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm trying to think of all the questions that anybody would ever ask.
I'll,
Go ahead, Doctor.
I'll add something else. Like as I told you, my wife had the triple negative breast cancer about 10 years ago, 11 years ago now.
Mhm.
And fortunately, it was early, the chemotherapy worked. But even that situation, a couple things I want to just point out about even when you get that diagnosis, as much as you can, just try to breathe for a minute and get your plan together. Because we were at two very well-known cancer centers, academic cancer centers. And at that time, this triple negative breast cancer, it's only about 10% of the breast cancers, but it actually happens more often in younger Black women. But it's a very aggressive form. And the one doctor said, well, okay, we need to go in there and go to surgery right away. My wife was like, okay, I want to get it cut out as soon as possible. But when he got a second opinion, I said, let's wait a second. Let's get this second opinion. This other doctor who was a specialist said, no, the biggest thing for you, you need to get your chemo first. They explained the reasons why. And now that's kind of a standard practice. So neither doctor was completely wrong, but I'm just saying that that's why even leading doctors in some of these cases, when you get into more rare or aggressive forms, there's differences of opinion. So for my wife, it worked better for her to have her chemo first, and it really responded. Then she ended up having, she had a bilateral mastectomy done. So I'll say that. And then the second thing I'll say is, even though for her it worked out well, for that it was secure, right? And there's still psychological issues that can come with that, because she'll say at times, you don't understand, like, my breasts were cut off. And she said, well, how would you feel as a man if some part of you was cut off? So there's things even that go on even beyond just surviving and all that I think women have to think of. But you do have to embrace it all and kind of tie in your faith and everything else to this journey, because it's a lot of facets to it. And I wanted to make sure I pointed that out.
Yeah, and that links into where I was going as far as like concluding everything. What would be your like recommendation or advice? And if they, if someone is experiencing it now, has never experienced this, what advice would you just give generally to each and every individual, male or female, young or old? What is the advice? And anyone can answer that.
I'll let the ladies go first. Maybe
All right. Yeah, you've been hogging it a little bit, Doctor, just saying. Go ahead, Burrow.
Okay, so I'm going to go from the advocate standpoint. I'll go from that. It's difficult. It's difficult on both ends for the person that's just had the diagnosis, and then the family member not knowing what to do and thinking the worst, because as a family member, you're going to think the worst automatically. And you're going to go to this, woe is me, what am I going to do if something happened to her? But my thing too, like Dr. Price said, just breathe. Just breathe. Offer to cook meals. Offer to wash clothes. Offer to come, bring some popcorn, some chocolate, sit down, watch a movie. Don't get the movies that's going to make you cry, though. Get movies that's going to make you laugh. You talk, go for a walk. So when I come across people that they're in this situation and they're really down, let me tell you, because they don't know what to do, because they're thinking about their life and what's going to happen. And then you tell, just breathe. Let's just talk through it. What do you want to talk about? We don't even have to talk about that. So as an advocate, my thing is just help them to breathe. And if they're scared to go to the doctor or get that second opinion, just, sit there and listen. And you might say, well, have you thought about this? Just think about things. You don't have to make any decisions, because it takes a long time sometimes for cancer to come out. So you just breathe for a minute. So that's my standpoint. Just everybody breathe and just not rush into anything. And I like the fact that getting a second opinion because everybody is different.
Amen. All right. How about you, Janice? What would be your advice to anyone that's experiencing or hasn't experienced
I would
anything?
say early detection is the key. That was the case for me. So early detection is the key. So the earlier, the sooner you can get to the doctor, or once you notice something, get it checked out. Because as the doctor already mentioned, when it's in phase 1, you get your better option there rather than waiting to phase 4, because you have that fear of not going to have it checked out to see, because you fear for what it will be. So
Mhm.
early detection is the key. So if you don't go to the doctor, at least do the stuff breast examination, something. But get your stuff checked out and make sure you have that annual mammogram every year.
Excellent. Well, I thank you all again for your time, for, in the middle of the week, Hump Day, joining us on this, special occasion. And this is just something that, we felt passionate about, here at the Life, to just get the word out again. And much like Lala stated, this should not be a conversation that only happens in October. It should be a consistent conversation. It should be a habit at this point where we always talk about it. But once again, I thank each and every one of you, for just joining us and giving you all's expertise on this. Unfortunately, in this matter, do you have any last minute comments or statements you'd like to say in regards to this?
I do.
Of course, you do.
I just want to say, as a community, as a culture, as families, let's start talking again. Let's start finding out our history, our family history. I remember as a young kid, we would sit up under grandma. We would learn. She would tell us all this stuff. Like, we don't do that anymore. And so a lot of times when certain things are happening to our bodies, um, it's like the first time we've heard of that thing, or we don't have any history that may go along with it as we go to the doctor. So start talking to your family, and even those with children. Start sharing certain things with your children about their history, so that these are things that they can carry in their back pocket when they're going sitting at these doctor's appointments, and something comes up that may be a concern, or the doctor's asking a question, and you can say, "Oh, well, I remember where my grandmother such and such and such." In this generation, we're not doing that anymore. And so I'm just going to encourage all of our listeners, start having those conversations, turn the TV off, and let's just talk. Let's talk.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think Beryl brought this up early on, and Mrs. Albright is also stating this once again, smile and not mind them of what they're going through. They already know. And Beryl, you spoke about this early on. I think each and every one of you spoke about this as far as like the attitude. Mindset is everything. I always say to my students, your attitude determines your altitude. So it really just has to focus on your mind, because it is a computer and it's only programmed to do exactly what you program it to do. And if you think positively, it will only go in that direction. So, again, thank you all so much. I've learned a lot. I know I don't have to worry about sex, so that's going to be fine. Um, Thank you, doctor. I'm very happy about that. But again, it happens 1 in 8, like the doctor mentioned. I hope everyone took notes. By the time you're 40, get it every year. And again, with the survivors and the advocates and the doctor, is there anything else you think we should know, pertaining to this, or even to just prevent, if there's a prevention? I don't know.
The only thing I would say, this is great, but also remember colorectal screening, check for colon cancer. That's important.
Ah,
Your blood pressure is important. Your weight's important. Just holistically look at everything, because it all kind of fits together. Nothing's in isolation.
absolutely. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope, again, God continues to bless each and every one of you because you are surviving. You're not survivors, you are surviving. So I am definitely grateful for that. And I'm happy that I was able to share the stage with you. So thank you once again and have a great night. And watch the show next week, Dr. Pryor. So
Will
don't make
do. Thank you.
have to call your wife. Okay.
Yes, and Tina, send me that hat. I need that.
Wait, I'm not even gonna tell you what they said about my hat backstage.
I need that hat.
But thank
You guys are beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye bye.
All righty. Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.